Here with our Wednesday morning read and discuss the Bible group. What happened to Barbara? Is she gone?
She was in her car.
Yeah, I think she went in
She could be
to sign on from inside.
She was at work cleaning. It was great.
I'll have to leave at 11:30.
Okay,
Right on
all right.
the dot.
Well, we'll
All
all
right.
go out with you then.
Okay, cool.
No, we're going to stay because we have a mission
You have
meeting.
mission.
Oh, there's a mission meeting today?
Yeah.
I didn't
But if
remember
our
that.
conversation goes over 11:30,
No,
I'm
you'll
sorry,
go.
I gotta
Yeah.
No, we'll stop.
And do we need to self-censor now? Anything we
No,
say?
no, I didn't
Dr.
say
Lee
that
said
for that
not.
purpose. We're going to just proceed to do what we're going to do. I'm not accepting that. And
Okay.
So if we get called into the principal's office, we'll defend it. So good morning. Here comes Barbara back now. Pretty sure that's going to be her. Yep.
Sorry, Pat.
That's all right. We knew where you were. Now we're back to not being able to see you again.
Oh, no. I don't know what I'm hitting that it says mute and whatever. It's where you. I forget what I did. Yes. I don't think I did anything and all of a sudden it happened last night. So you can hear me, so
Yeah, we can hear you right, and you can hear us, right?
yes.
All
And
right.
I can see me.
Okay, all right, that's fine then. So we decided that our pickup point is Isaiah chapter 13. This is an oracle. This is a pronouncement from supposedly Isaiah, not necessarily the same voice that has been making pronouncements in the first chapters, but here we are. This is the pronouncements of Isaiah against and toward Babylon. So, who's going to read? All right, here we go.
God's message to Babylon. God showed Isaiah, son of Amoz, this message about Babylon. Raise a flag on the bare mountain. Call out to the men. Raise your hand to signal them. Tell them to enter through the gate for important people. I myself have commanded those people, whom I have separated as mine. I have called those warriors to carry out my anger. They rejoice and are glad to do my will. Listen to the loud noise in the mountains. It sounds like many people. Listen to the noise among the kingdoms. Nations are gathering together. The Lord of heaven's armies is calling his army together for battle. This army is coming from a faraway land. It is coming from the edge of the horizon. In anger, the Lord is using this army like a weapon, and it will destroy the whole country. Cry, because the Lord's day of judging is near. God all-powerful is sending destruction. People will be weak with fear. Their courage will melt away. Everyone will be afraid. Pain and hurt will grab them. They will hurt like a woman giving birth to a baby. They will look at each other in fear. Their faces will become red like fire. Look, the Lord's day of judging is coming. It will be a terrible day. God will be very angry, and he will destroy the country. God will destroy the sinners who live in the land. The stars will not show their light. The skies will grow dark. The sun will grow dark as it rises, and the moon will not give its light. The Lord says, I will punish the world for its evil. I will punish wicked people for their sins. I will cause the proud people to lose their pride. I will destroy the pride of those who are cruel to others. People will be harder to find than pure gold. There will be fine gold and Ophir. I will make the sky shake, and the earth will be moved from its place. The Lord of heaven's armies will be very angry. His anger will burn at that time. Then the people from Babylon will run away like hunted deer. They will run like sheep who have no shepherd. Everyone will turn back to his own people. Each will run back to his own land. Anyone who is captured will be killed. Everyone who is caught will be killed with a sword. The little children will be beaten to death as their parents watch. Everything in their houses will be stolen, and their wives will be raped. Look, I will cause the armies of Media to attack Babylon. They do not care about silver, they do not delight in gold. Their soldiers will shoot the young men with arrows. The soldiers will show no mercy on the children. They will not feel sorry for the little boys. Babylon is the most beautiful of all kingdoms. The Babylonians are very proud of it, but God will destroy it like Sodom and Gomorrah. No one will ever live there. No one will settle there again. No Arab will put his tent there. No shepherd will bring his sheep there. Only animals from the desert will live there. The houses of Babylon will be full of wild dogs. Owls will live there. Wild goats will leap about in houses. Wolves will howl with strong walls. Wild dogs will bark in beautiful buildings. The end of Babylon is near. Its time is almost over. Boy,
Yeah.
we've read these threads before, you know, in Isaiah, or prophecies, whatever you wanted to call that, but
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, honestly, you, me, and here we are in 2023, and I don't even know what to make of this kind of an oracle. All I can say is, as I'm listening, is that Isaiah as a person and the Israelites are furious. They're full of fury, they're full of hate, they're full of the need for revenge, for, I don't know, vindication of their own people. And so the images that are stirred up are, it's like an imagination of what that God is going to cause to happen to Babylon, the very things that happened to Israel. So there's a sense in which that's the meaning of justice in this particular time. An eye for an eye. And so the fury and, you know, the ravishing of women, the killing of, I mean, the language is so torturous. They're going to kill the children while the parents watch. I can't help but thinking that what's happening here is they're saying what you did to us, God is going to do to you. Because the conquest of Babylon was when Babylon defeated Israel and decimated it. This is what happened.
yeah, what goes around comes around. There you go.
I guess, and the idea underneath is, so that's God's version of justice, right?
Right. Here it comes. It's a hurtful thought, right? It's very hurtful.
I think it's only an escalation of violence in the world. So
Well,
if the point is that behaving like this when you're the victim of it is a really bad thing, then behaving this way when you are the perpetrator of it is equally as bad. It's what justice is imagined that God is somehow working out in Isaiah's claims. I don't know.
either.
This is I'm at a loss for words. This is a signal of the kind of time and culture in which these people lived. And
Yeah, but it's not only them, I mean, it continues today.
yes, it does.
We watch it all the time, and maybe having passages like this where it appears that God is on the side of people who are seeking vengeance, doesn't matter which side, I guess. How does God pick a side anyway? But
Yeah.
when people are doing such evil things, reading this and hearing that doesn't that prolong, like, okay, if God's for it, then I am too?
Yeah, it certainly opens the door to an understanding of God, that God is like this. This is how God is. Like, if this is the oracle of Isaiah, who claims in some ways to be speaking an oracle from God, I see it as it'll be comforting to the people of Israel who hear it, who might be comforted by the idea that, again, what they've done to us is going to be done to them. But I don't really even know who are the kind of people who would be okay with the idea that even the Babylonians would have their children's heads cut off. I mean, who would be okay with that, even if it's happened to you? Even if somebody perpetrated that kind of, the world we live in today, if someone, breaks into a home and rapes and murders the women and then kills the children and dismembers them and all that, and then they're arrested and they're taken before the court, justice in no way approaches the idea that, well, you're guilty, so now what you did is going to be done to you. And they bring their family in, and they kill them and they dismember them.
That
That's
doesn't
not,
restore to you what
Yeah.
you lost.
No.
that's not justice.
Just,
That's revenge. That's just revenge.
Just sheer revenge.
That's
And the
all.
idea that God, authors that kind of a way of responding in the world.
well, I don't think God does, and I think, but people who have power use it because they know there are people in the wider world that appeals to, because they have these biblical references to say, oh, yes,
Yeah.
God's okay with that. Let's go behind the leader. I mean, the only people that could possibly benefit are the generals, whose jobs it
Saves.
right. I mean, you don't need a general if you're never going to be aggressive towards other people. But, oh well.
Yeah, like I said, I'm at a loss for words for now, how to characterize this.
Well, maybe the
Like-
undertakers will benefit. Who knows?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
Yeah.
it's how the world has operated, though. It seems like ever since human beings could pick up clubs. So,
Yep.
how do we change that?
The
Well-
summons,
How do we change it?
yeah, the summons to war presupposes Israel's holy war traditions, in which the Lord fights on behalf of Israel with his consecrated ones, his heavenly army. The day of the Lord, the imagery of wailing together with pangs and agony evokes the imagery of childbirth. Such imagery builds on the role that the birth of Isaiah's own symbolically named sons play in communicating his oracles. Because the Lord is the sovereign of all creation, elements of creation such as stars, moon, sun, all play roles in the assault against the arrogant and evil on the day of the Lord.
Okay, that doesn't resonate with me at
No.
all, but,
It was a terrible time before this time. And I guess, is it possible that we can see this as an oracle of comfort? Can it be seen as an oracle of comfort to those who have been abused and murdered and, I don't know. Is that comforting?
no, not to me. I don't know, but I'm not one of those people that have lost everything. The other message of Isaiah is, but God will restore you, not God will revenge or seek vengeance on your behalf, but God will restore you.
Right.
The restoration doesn't really depend upon you meeting out the same kind
The
of,
death of your enemies.
yeah,
And part of what's somehow, it's difficult, the commentators, it's difficult to place the timing of this. Like, when is this happening? What's the condition? Because ultimately, while there's a hope buried in here of the ultimate torture and destruction of their enemies, the creation of Persia creates a whole new dynamic in the world of the Assyrians and the Babylonians who did brutal things to Israel. Persia comes to power, alliances are worked out between Babylon and Persia. When Persia conquers Babylon, they don't destroy it. They don't. And then, because of that now new empire emerging, Israel gets rebuilt. It's
but then the Persians get conquered by the Romans.
Right.
And the Romans have a hand in destroying the temple. And, So if there's always this cycle, maybe the bad things that happen are not God. It's just the way things are. People in power do tend to, sometimes do evil things to other people to gain more power, and that's human. That's
Yeah.
humanity. That's got nothing to do with God. That's turning your back on God, I think. That's
Oh, I do
isolating
too.
yourself.
I think that's, but yet, what we face is, here we are at those places where we have to decide. We read Esther last night, and we like that. We like that. We like that. We don't like this.
Yeah.
So are we allowing the voice of God to only speak what are we the determining factors? Are we the ones that then pick and choose between,
I don't like that God, I like this.
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Have
right.
to, and then I have to say, I admit it. You have to give into it. You have to give into, there is an interpretive principle that can be applied to all these readings, and I keep bringing up the interpretive principle of the mission of God. What is the mission of God in the world? The mission of God in the world is to bless the families of the earth. And then you put it to the litmus test. Can you see this as a blessing? No, I cannot. Even if it's on behalf of a people who have suffered, it's not a blessing in the world. It's not a blessing to have children tortured in front of their parents. It's not. Some of the readers of the Psalms say you have to let the Psalms be the Psalms because they express the gut feeling of people. There's a psalm that says, pray that God will dash the heads of my enemies, children, against rocks.
Because that was a big thing.
Yeah, and the lectionary people come along and they take all that out, so you don't read that. And the commentator or the present day interpreters say, you need to give the people of the Psalms, give them their due to be able to express themselves. And if they want to call down fire in their prayers against their enemies, let them go. But that does not then tell you something about God. It doesn't. It only tells you something more about what we're like when we have been beaten and tortured. And I think in some ways that's what this oracle is about.
There's always that temptation to wish something evil comes upon your enemies. It's part of human nature. I remember a few days ago, a show, I don't even remember what channel it was on, but somebody was interviewing a woman in one of the cities, maybe Kherson or one of them that had been severely bombed in Ukraine, and she had her building, the top floors where she used to live are gone. Now she's in another area where she's looking for, shelter from the bombing, and she's talking about how disruptive and her family suffers, and they asked her how she felt, about Putin. And she said, if I were able to go face to face right now with Putin, now I'm listening and I'm thinking, you're going to say I'm going
Right.
to kill him. She doesn't. She says, I just would like to slap him in the face. I would slap him so hard. She didn't. That woman who
Right.
suffered still can't say, I would kill him. I'm thinking that. And
Go
I'm
get
not
him,
even
right.
there.
Do
Yeah.
it for the world.
So there is some part of human nature that rebels against that kind of revenge. And I thought, well, that would be an impulse too. That would help you feel better if you slap that guy in the face. But you don't have to say you would kill him.
No, and you don't have to try to match the suffering that they caused by returning the suffering to their own life.
Return no man evil for
Yeah,
evil.
and what's that, eye for an eye turns into
Right.
a nation of blind people. That's
That's right.
that's the result of eye for an eye. And you get it, there is a temptation to say, what rights the scales of justice? What brings it back? And I think that the ethic of Jesus and the ethic of other prophets, and even Isaiah in other places, is that what rights the scales of justice is mercy. It's not It's not
Right.
violence, it's not revenge. That's not how it unfolds. I'm getting a message here. It's all right. What?
Is tonight the session meeting?
Yes, it is. It's at 7:30.
Okay, because Walter thinks it's tomorrow.
It's not, it's tonight. Yep.
So where a good slap in the face is still violence, it's not overdone. It's-
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, you know, like I talked before about if someone does terrible things, you bring them into the court does not reciprocate with an equal torture or vengeance against you, and that, in the world we live in today, we believe is some form of what justice is. But justice is not equal revenge. It's not. And are we going to project that on God? Is that what we think? Because if that's the case, it plays right into the more fundamentalist interpretation of Jesus dying on the cross. Because then we all deserve to die. We all deserve to have our arms and legs cut off and be tortured and all the rest of that. But Jesus somehow in the divine miracle takes all that torture on himself, and therefore we're now exempt from that. Well,
That's so
yeah,
unsatisfying.
well, it is,
And
and
it's so silly.
and it's not, you know, Jesus wasn't the only man to die on a Roman cross. He wasn't. And I think that the message then becomes, can we look and learn from Jesus who goes before us as to how to deal with the brutality of the world? And Jesus' words from the cross, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing,
Right.
would seem to me to be fly in the face of this whole idea that somebody's got to die. You know,
Yeah.
the world's like that, right? We have this this need, going back to the sacrificial system, that in order for our sins, if you will, or our failures or our bad behavior, someone has to die. Something has to die, so that there's a victimization justice. Jesus, along with many passages of Scripture, takes that and turns it around and says, no, that's not who God is.
You don't need a sacrifice.
No, you don't.
So that's kind of why I rebelled against the story of Jesus. I mean, I don't think Jesus meant to sacrifice himself.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
And I think that's a horrible story, and if that, you know, that's the way you want to look at it, I don't want to criticize, but I think that doesn't hold much hope for humanity. It's a terrible way to look at things. We're only worthy because one human being was murdered by the Romans on a, you know, I mean, they murdered a lot of people.
Yeah.
What are the stories of those people? I mean, you know,
Well, in
I don't
order
get it.
to get that, you have to accept the cosmic identity of Jesus, that he was the universal human. Like Paul says, he was the second Adam. But still, I'm always reminded that in the United States justice system, you may not take another person's punishment. You may not. It's actually illegal. If you kill someone and you did it,
You are
your family member cannot step up and say, oh, you know, execute me, or I'll serve him. You can't do it because it's seen as an aberration of justice. It's not justice. It's not the straightforward justice. So that's why I move completely away from most of the interpretations of Jesus that are very much a part of the fundamentalist sort of, and I mean by that, the effort on some people back in the 1900s to boil Christianity down to its fundamentals. And I think when they boiled it down, they ended up with a very strange thing that I don't recognize.
Sludge.
Like, it's not the essence of Christianity. It's just not.
It's like they base it all on John 3:16.
Yeah, and even
You know,
that.
they'll call that out
Right,
all
and
the
even
time.
that, you have to sort of just do a gloss on that in listening. And you have to then rule out all the other things that they've said. So, you know, for God so loved the world, Christian theology says God so loved the world that God came and died God's self.
Right.
The central message is not oh, I put my son up for sacrifice, and that somehow that appeases the courts of heaven, justice, which are higher than me. It's a strange image of God, very strange. And the idea that, listen, if I was going to be killed and someone took a bullet for me, yeah, that's an amazing thing. They jump in front of you and I get
Yeah,
it.
they push down,
That's
right?
heroic, but
Yeah,
that's,
but I don't think that's the
that's not
Christian
what's-
story. That's
right.
not what Jesus, it's not what Jesus said. It's he comes, and I often said Jesus did not ride into Jerusalem to commit suicide. He did not. He went into Jerusalem to preach the gospel of love and peace, to make another appeal especially to the religious authorities, about how far off they have traveled in the trail from who God really is, and as a result, they killed him. He did not back away from what he was teaching. And I think then, because of that, we ought to then just maybe go back and pay a little more attention to what he said.
exactly.
And what he
that's
did.
makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. You
I
see
do.
evil, it's your duty to right the evil
right,
in whatever way you can. And he did it with his tongue. That was his way. That was his talent. That was
right,
his mission. He used the word
yes.
of God.
And he stood up
And
to,
in Islam, he's actually called the word of God, too. He is, that's what, so why don't we listen to what he's saying?
right. Yeah, the text this past Sunday was the Transfiguration, and the voice from heaven says, listen to him.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, listen to what he says.
Might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, why don't we move past this,
Horror.
see if Isaiah can come up with anything more redeeming. I don't know.
I don't know
Can we
either.
plead with him? Come on, Isaiah, you can do better
But
than
we
this.
know you're gonna get better, so
I
let's
don't
go.
know.
So going on from 14, and it's a long one.
All right, you want me to read?
If you will read, that'd be
Sure.
great.
It says, the caption is, Israel will return home. The Lord will again show mercy to the people of Jacob. The Lord will again choose the people of Israel. He will settle them in their own land. The non-Israelite people will join the Israelites. The non-Israelite people will become a part of the family of Jacob. Nations will take the Israelites back to their land. Those men and women from the other nations will become slaves to Israel. In the past, the Israelites were their own slaves, but now the Israelites will defeat those nations and rule over them. The Lord will take away the Israelites' hard work, and he will comfort them. They will no longer have to work as slaves. On that day, Israel will sing the song about the king of Babylon. The cruel king who ruled us is finished. His rule is finished. The Lord breaks the scepter of evil rulers. He takes away their power. The king of Babylon beat people in anger. He beat them again and again. He ruled the people in anger. He kept on doing terrible things to the people. But now, the whole land rests and is quiet. Now the people will begin to sing. Even the pine trees are happy, and the cedar trees of Lebanon rejoice. They say, the king has fallen. No one will ever cut us down again. The place of the dead is excited to meet you when you come. It wakes the spirits of the dead to greet you. They were the leaders of the world. It makes dead kings stand up from their thrones to greet you. They were rulers of nations. All these leaders will make fun of you. They will say, now you are weak as we are. Now you are just like us. Your pride has been sent down to where the dead are. Their music from your harps goes with it. Flies are spread out like your bed beneath you, and worms cover your body like a blanket. King of Babylon, morning star, you have fallen from heaven, even though you were as bright as the rising sun. In the past, all the nations on earth bowed down before you, but now you have been cut down. You told yourself, I will go up to heaven. I will put my throne above God's stars. I will sit on the mountains of the gods. I will sit on the slopes of the sacred mountain. I will go up above the tops of the clouds. I will be like God Most High. But you were brought down to the grave. You were brought down to the deep places where the dead are. Those who see you stare at you. They think about what has happened to you. They say, is this the same man who caused the great fear on earth? Is he the one who shook the kingdoms? Is this the man who turned the land into a desert? Is he the one who destroyed its cities? He is the one who captured people in war and would not let them go home? Every king of the earth has been buried with honor. Every king has his own grave, but you are thrown out of your grave. Like an unwanted branch is cut from a tree and thrown away. You are covered by bodies that died in battle. You have been thrown into a rocky pit, and other soldiers will walk on you. You will not be buried like other people. This is because you ruined your own country, and you killed your own people, so your children will never be mentioned again. Prepare to kill his children. Kill them because their father is guilty. They will never again take control of the earth. They will never again fill the world with their cities. The Lord of heaven's armies says this: I will fight against those people. I will destroy Babylon and its people. I will destroy its people and their descendants, says the Lord. I will make Babylon fit only for owls. It will become a swamp. I will sweep Babylon as with a broom of destruction, says the Lord's army of heaven. Do we have to go find out about poor Syria?
Well, you should
All
go
right.
on. There's
All right.
more to the
All right.
poetry.
Oh, all right, I got you. Oh,
Wonderful
this is
poetry.
lovely
Yeah,
poetry. I just
yeah.
got a new book of Robert Frost poems. It's
Just
very
like this,
different.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
Snowy woods.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was so
They will
lovely.
cut you down.
Right. The Lord of heaven's armies are made this promise. These things will happen exactly as I planned them. These things will happen exactly as I set them up. I will destroy the king of Assyria in my country, and I will trample him on my mountains. He put a heavy load on my people, but that weight will be removed. This is what I plan to do against all the earth. I will raise my hand to strike down all nations. When the Lord of heaven's armies make a plan, no one can stop it. When the Lord raises his hand to punish people, no one can stop him. This message was given the year King Ahaz died. Country of Philistia, don't be so happy. The king who beat you is now dead, but he is like a snake that will give birth to another dangerous snake. The new king will be like a quick, dangerous snake to bite you. Even the poorest of my people will be able to eat safely. People in need will be able to lie down in safety, but I will kill your family with hunger, and all your people who are left will die. People near the city gates cry out, Philistines, be frightened. A cloud of dust comes from the north. It is an army full of men ready to fight. What shall we tell the messengers from Philistia? Say that the Lord has made Jerusalem strong. Say that its poor people will go there for safety.
We're still doing the our God is better than yours.
Yep.
Whose side are you on? Which team?
Yeah, it's still, I don't know, in some ways, I try to listen to it in a way to give the suffering people their voice. You know, they have a right to say what they've experienced, and they have a right to cry out against it, and they have a right to believe that God hears their cries, and that God is not simply going to ignore the torture and the suffering and the dismemberment of a nation. And so, like, it's not, one thing to point out is Isaiah is not saying, we're going to go do this. Isaiah is not calling forth an army. He's not putting together a plan to go invade Assyria or to go, he's saying that you sow the seeds of violence and injustice and you will reap the whirlwind. And I think we have to give him at least that much, that he is saying that God doesn't regard these terrible, terrible things that have been perpetrated against the children of Israel as if they're nothing, and that somehow you can just go on and you're going to be okay. And Isaiah is saying, you're a fool. You cannot live this way in the world without the whirlwind coming and paying the price, not necessarily from us, but that, you know, you will fail. The psalmist says that no nation who rises up and comes to power with injustice will prevail. They will all fall. They will see their end. And in the one psalmist, I can't, which psalm? And it is God who will do it. Now, again, I'm not trying to make out a vengeful God, but almost an appeal to, well, they talk about the, quoted and requoted, the arc of history bends towards justice. In some ways, the best reading of this is that what Isaiah is saying. Justice will prevail. And what you have dreamed for suffering and everything will come back and be lived out against you, because you are spinning this tale in the world. And this is God's earth. This is God's world. You cannot live like this and cause suffering and torture and without it falling back on you. And if I can give Isaiah just that much permission to be saying that, like, okay. It's like I said to my son when he was moving out into the world in a town that had a lot of bad actors in it. And I would say to him when he would leave the house, you know, think for yourself, what do you want to have happen in your life? How do you want your life to unfold? If you go out and you engage in these kinds of behaviors, it is going to come back at you. You will not be able to live a life of freedom. You will not, that's not how life is. And I didn't use the God word in that, but in some ways, talking more about the structures of the world. You cannot get away with injustice in this world. Now, I still hope that's true.
Yeah, I'm sitting over here, I'm feeling like the skeptic. I don't know. Oh, well.
Isaiah is writing this after all these conquests.
Yes.
So Isaiah is aware that evil empires don't last that long. But then other evil empires come.
Oh, yeah, that other snake is waiting there
You're
for
right.
you. Right.
So
Well, I think he is
there's an
saying,
end to the cycle.
I think he's reflecting on what has happened, but he's also trying to make sure that people don't just look at it and think that it's an accident that it's happened.
Right.
He's trying to say it's with purpose. You know, Assyria fell with purpose. Babylon, who, you know, was in our face and was pushing us, trampling us under their boots, are now being trampled, and they're now suffering, and their legacy, this big, long thing. You know,
Yeah.
and as I was going through, I wanted my fundamentalist friends to say, we want you to notice that Isaiah does not mention hell. It's not hell. Where does the king where does the king of Babylon go? He's the worst person ever lived on the earth. Look at what he's done. Where does he go? He goes down to the place where other people
They're excited.
are sleeping.
I love
right?
the-
Yeah, they're excited
The
to
place
see
of
him.
the dead is excited to meet you when you come.
Right, they're excited to see him, and they're excited to make fun of him. There's no fire, there's no torture. It's like, yeah, you were Mr. Big Shot. Well, you're
fool,
not Mr.
caught
Big
up to
Shot
you.
now, are you? You know,
Mr. Big Shot, right.
and you were like, you thought you were going to rise above God, like you were going to be higher than God. And now guess what? Where are you?
Yeah.
Oh, look at you. You're buried in the ground just like everybody else, only you're not buried in the ground. This is where that theology
yes.
comes out.
Yeah.
You don't even get to be buried. Your body is going to lay on the surface,
Yep.
and it's going to be eaten. Your translation said it's covered with flies.
Yeah, flies.
My translation says maggots.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
It's
Well,
maggots.
that's after the flies lay their eggs, right?
That's right.
They're all there. Yeah,
So-
mine said flies.
No, but so what is the reality in terms of this whole thing of how the doctrine of hell was developed later on, much, much later on, in response to how the Romans and the Greeks thought about, torture and punishment. Here they are. Here's the Hebrew prophet. He can imagine all kinds of terrible things happening in this life. But when your life is over, you're the worst person that ever lived on the planet, and what are you subjected to? Mocking. The other kings of the earth are making fun of you now. That's it?
Yeah.
But I guess for a person who is a megalomaniac, who loves power and attention, what's the worst thing that can happen to them?
I guess.
That they be
Debased.
debased and mocked and made fun of? That must be the worst torture you could imagine for a king like this.
Thinking of Mussolini, the way they hung him
Oh,
upside
gosh,
down.
yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
so that's kind of.
It's
the
a little bit
image
like
we-
that, like a humiliation is planned for him. Underground, in the place of the dead. That's the key.
Yeah, the place of the dead.
Place of the dead. And that,
And that will spit you out, because you're not.
That's
that's
to
right,
the
you're not
place of
even,
the
you're
dead.
not,
Not gonna
and
be
that was
welcome.
common to say there are some people, I know it's a modern translation, but they didn't even want the elements of some people to then be recycled into the earth, to then be part of the daisies that would grow. They wanted the essence of their personness to be cut off in the great circle of life. Your body, we don't
Yeah.
even want your body to return to
Right.
its basic elements and nurture the soil.
Was that like the Greek play Lysistrata, where, was it that one? It's probably not, I'm getting them all mixed up. But the one where the queen's sons are actually not allowed to be buried, so she's going to seek vengeance about that because they were cast out for the birds and the dogs to consume. So that was like a big theme, I guess.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a proper burial, that
Yeah.
was the ultimate insult.
Yeah, because more than I think any contemporary society accepts, the circle of life involves, Genesis says you were drawn up out of the earth and you return to the earth. You are dust. Here's our theme for Ash Wednesday. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. And that's it. You don't need to make it bigger than that.
You came from God, out of the earth, and to God you will return to the earth.
Right. And so what is the worst? How does the human community say no to who you became? They say no in the most powerful way by saying, we'll lay you on the surface and the dogs will eat you and digest you. The birds will eat you and digest you, so that you, if you use the word DNA, your DNA will not be recognizable
all.
in the sequence of life and of what causes,
Yeah.
And then also the whole idea that the goal of life was to live your life, especially in the early Christian circles, so that when you were buried, you could rest in peace.
Right.
That you would rest,
Yeah.
and that the kings of torturous people would not sit up and say, oh, aren't you finally here?
Yeah, right.
That all of this is just imaginings, our most creative human imaginings, to help us to deal with the fact that there are good people in the world and there are terrible people in the world. And that feeling that terrible people should not go unpunished. Like, it should not be that you could just go out in the world and kill people and do whatever you want to do and then have no consequence. So I think that what Isaiah is simply doing in this oracle is he's spinning a big smoke oracle of the consequence that exists in life for unjust and terrible behavior.
Yep.
And yes, he's attributing that to God, because I don't think we have to go too far in imagining somehow that, God is actually like organizing an army to go in and brutalize and torture these people. But what it comes down to is that the king of Babylon is going to fall, and fall hard and long and into the ground and not in the ground. And and you will see his, there's a phrase that's picked up in the New Testament about Jesus. Who will continue his line?
Oh,
There's a big problem in the early theology of Jesus because the New Testament tells us nothing of children. And it tells us, it gives us this, to have no children, to have no prodigy, is the punishment. And Jesus didn't have children according to the New Testament. So
your
who
lineage
will
is
establish
gone.
his line? Is Jesus now allowed to return to the soil? And is his body now nurturing the body of the earth? Well, I mean, he was laid in the tomb, but then he was not buried.
you know, when I did read that part about the kids, it really kind of stopped me for a minute, because it said, so your children will never be mentioned again. Prepare to kill his children. Kill them because their father's guilty. Huh?
That's cutting off the line.
Yeah, that's what
ending
you're
the
talking
DNA,
about,
like,
right. This is
whatever.
it.
You are bad blood,
Yeah,
and we don't want your blood carried
But
into the
people
world.
Remember you, there are
Right.
certain pharaohs, after they reigned and were buried, they came into disrepute, and their cartouches are all hammered out, so that no one would remember their names. One of them was Akhenaten, who
Oh,
tried to
Yeah,
have,
we heard of it.
one god, right? And so after he left, they went back to the old gods, and they just destroyed the name on all the funerary,
Wow.
dedications and all of this, try to get rid of them completely.
Wipe out the
Yep.
memory of him, as well as, and that's,
And unfortunately, because they did that, that held more mystique. So now we really got to find out, the archaeologists want to find out, why was he hated? So now his
Ah.
whole story comes out, and, so,
backfires.
yeah,
Yep.
it did backfire, but I guess when people feel certain animosity, that's not God doing that,
No.
that's the people doing that. But probably some of these kings do not need to be remembered, not at least as wonderful rulers, but we can do the same thing when we talk about some of the rulers of Israel. Did they really need to be, reverenced in the years after?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not, but it depends again on who's writing the story. Who's writing the story?
It always cracks me up that they say, like, David is the apple of God's eye. Oh, really? Okay,
And there's things that you can look at, like,
Oh, yeah,
if God
yeah.
forgives David, then.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't
Oh, that was what I was told from the time I was a
Uh-huh.
child. Like, look at this, look at what David did. And by the way, what he did, the murder wasn't really emphasized. The affair, the adulterous relationship, the Bathsheba, was his one failure. I
guess
go,
that early church folk
Yeah,
can
well,
you
there we
please,
go.
more upset by
Yeah.
You don't do that.
Can you just please go read the text? Can you
Yeah.
read the whole story of David? Can you,
No,
oh, my
because then we'll
goodness.
lose it. Right. I was wondering, like, in verse 23, where mine says, I'll make Babylon only for owls. I was wondering, what do you guys have? We're going to turn it into the swamp
Yeah,
there?
Yep. Let's see, what verse is it?
23.
I will make it a possession of the hedgehog and pools of water. Wait a minute.
Yeah, pools of water.
Okay.
And I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, says the Lord of hosts. But there is a spot where it says owls too. Where is it?
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know.
The owls are going to live in the swamp of Babylon, so.
Yeah, it does mention,
Yeah.
it mentions the owls because I heard you read it.
A couple of times.
Oh, and, okay, this is the revised edition, the NRSV says.
Okay.
And I will make it a possession of the screech owl
Mm.
and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, says the Lord of hosts.
Mine says hedgehog.
Yeah,
I like
this-
that, hedgehog,
This
huh?
version says the same thing,
Okay.
hedgehog.
My note says that That's a prose conclusion repeating the motif of reversion to primitive conditions.
Yeah.
All right. It's going to be
When I
bad.
read I think of Chernobyl, you know, and the status of Chernobyl after the terrible accident or disaster, and the fact that it's a no man's land, no woman's land. It's a place where nothing can live. And I watched the movie Chernobyl recently, and I wasn't aware that after the accident, the USSR established an extermination team. They went in, they killed all the wildlife too. They killed everything they could find.
I watched that too. I thought it was
Yeah,
great.
And I think that at least that's the idea here,
Right.
is that where did the evil of Babylon come from? Where did it rise up from? What is the source of such terrible, terrible things in the earth made by God? And the idea is, let's go back, not just remove Babylon, but go back and see to it that it's scorched earth. Like, whatever produced you, we don't want any more like you in this world.
That's a good thing. Broom of destruction.
Yep.
Yep.
Sweep it all away. Whatever caused this king and this people to behave the way they behaved on the planet, let's remove all of it. Let's make sure we don't miss any of what might have caused that.
Well, it's like all power hungry, right?
Yeah.
I mean, ego, big, like you said, megalomaniac, you know.
And again, I think there's a selective blindness to their own history.
Right.
Because,
They had kings doing the same thing.
That's
my
right.
goodness, Babylon did
Not
not
long
come,
before that.
did not come about in a vacuum. Babylon and Assyria too. Assyria came about as a consequence of the brutality of the behavior of ancient Israel. I mean, what a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about when you were a kid and like certain things were said. I always remember this. Well, the God of the Old Testament is, you know, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And then when Christ comes to earth, it's like he's rewritten, and I'm
The new
coming with
therapy.
mercy. Yeah,
He was the
yeah,
therapy.
yeah. He has mercy and justice. He has a
God
different.
of The Old Testament? We're
Right.
gonna call it the Old
Yeah, Old Testament.
There are also moments of mercy.
Yes.
And it's just how are we attributing to God
Yeah.
what's happening between human beings?
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying there's another way to look at things,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think he was the only one, and I don't think, I
Right.
think it's unfair to say the God that's portrayed in all these earlier books is all
Yeah.
awful.
I think they, like, just like we're saying, it's like they
a
gave it
lot.
that broad sweep, like, here's what it is here, but look what it is here.
Because in the so-called New Testament, you
Yeah.
could also look at God as, well, the one who allowed someone like Jesus to be.
Yes, crucified,
Murder.
yeah.
I don't get that either.
And usually that's when I come back, and, I'm a fan of the Old Testament. My friend Ben Frauman, he'll throw at me from time to time, he'll say, well, you like the Old Testament, I don't. And I go, well, you haven't read it. You really haven't read it. And by the way, giving yourself permission to do that hermeneutical divide, which is, you read in the Hebrew scriptures, and throughout the scriptures, you learn what God is like, but you also learn what people are like.
Absolutely.
And I think there's invitation. I think there's invitation right in the text itself for us to understand that not everyone who says God, God, is speaking for God. Not by a long shot. And Jesus and Paul in the New Testament warns about that. He says,
I heard a voice of God and he
yeah,
told me, right?
I mean, and we do the same today.
Yeah.
You have to be able to distinguish between the people who claim they are speaking for God and the people who actually are not speaking for God at all. Even though they're maybe in the pulpit of a really big church, or they're wearing all the robes and all the power symbols of human beings in church, doesn't mean anything if what they say violates the principle of love. If what they say, this is why I think Paul's great summary is God is love. Not God is love now.
All right.
Not God is,
Didn't exist
God has
before.
become
Right.
love, or anything like that.
Because there's Ruth. There's
Yeah.
always Ruth.
Right. There are these powerful examples of God, not in the pen or on the lips of hostile and jealous and power-hungry people
Right.
who do what they do in the name of God, and because they win. If they win, there's an assumption. If they win,
Yeah.
that then was God. If they lose, then there's an assumption, well, God was against them. I don't know. And I still think it prevails today. It's still going on in our human consciousness and the way we try to understand God. And then we try to figure out who God is, and what we really do then is just project an image of ourselves.
Right.
10 Commandments say that the worst thing you could do in the world is to create an image of God that is not God, but it is your image. You created it. And throughout much of, it's not even just in the Old Testament. It's throughout the Bible. You see the leaders of the Sanhedrin, you see the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you see,
Speaking for God.
yeah, like
Their version.
they're all talking for God. They all have an idea of what God wants. Those men that picked up the stones and were ready to stone the woman caught in adultery, they thought they were doing what God wanted them to do. I don't know. I think you can look at it and go, nah, maybe not. Maybe you're just trying to convince your wife that you're not involved in adultery. You would never have anything to do with someone like that.
Most of the stories in what we're calling the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, is stories also, not only of people getting slaughtered, but also the meek, the lastborn coming to see themselves exalted over the firstborn. It's the turning over of what people thought
Right.
was the
Like
natural
tradition.
order of the
Yeah,
world,
yeah.
what should be. It's always the underdog that gets the recognition in these stories. And that, I think, is part of what Jesus was saying too.
Right.
So, that story, that whole bunch of stories are there too, in addition to, and God will have vengeance and
Yes.
la 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 la, so you kind of have to be really instead of critical race theory, maybe it should be critical biblical theories.
Well, there
There
is
you go.
biblical criticism.
Right.
And that is just
Don't
like
say that
oh.
in Florida, because
Well, I know,
they'll
just-
take this book off the shelf.
That's right.
Well, listen, in the 40s through the 50s and 60s, with the rise of scholarly literary criticism, which means they were doing the historical archaeology, looking to understand the Bible beyond just the surface of the words. Again, the rise of the fundamentalists. The reason the fundamentalists came up with the fundamentals was because they didn't want any more learning. You have to stop this biblical critical reading of the Bible. And actually, in pastors searching for positions would be questioned by search committees of whether they accept biblical criticism. Because it sounds like that you're criticizing the Bible.
And if it's the inerrant word of God, you cannot.
It's got to be taken right face value.
Well, and that
Don't think
Right,
about
don't
the stories.
pull it apart.
And the irony of it is that what critical thinking means is that you take the text very seriously, that you take it so seriously that you want nothing attached to it that doesn't actually belong to it, and so you enter into critical thinking. You know, critical thinking is not rooted to criticism, as in, I don't like this, or it's critical, meaning every nuance of it is important. And so it's very strange that the biblical inerrancy movement took a position against critical reading of the text.
Well, I think that's exemplified by what you said before. They'll take readings and they'll cut out anything that is like, has a hint of sex or anything that's too bloody, don't want the kids to hear. So they're actually doing what they think the critical thinkers are doing. They're actually.
Exactly right. That's the great trick, right, in politics. Accuse your enemy of doing what you're doing,
Projection.
you know?
Exactly.
And the whole,
That's right.
as a human being, just as a human being, growing up in this world and traveling in the religious world, it actually fries the synapses of my brain when you see people who are claiming that the Bible as it is inerrant, but they have no energy to find out what it actually is saying. Like, does it matter? Well, it should. It should matter. But what I find is that what they believe, what people tend to believe is inerrant, is what they think. What I think cannot be wrong. It cannot be wrong. And, you know, the idea, you know, give me the good old gospel, the old time, because that couldn't be wrong.
It was good enough
Really?
for Granddad.
That's right.
Good enough for me.
That couldn't be wrong? Really?
No.
Based on what? I mean, you can get anything wrong in this world. And in the seminaries and in the universities, a lot of the critical reading of the Bible came about when we began to realize that we were interpreting whole sections of the Bible and the sacred word incorrectly. Incorrectly. Now, in the Roman Catholic tradition, in its more ancient tradition, that's not a problem. Because the Bible is not ultimately the authority. It's not.
Not at all.
Vice Regent John.
Right. The chosen leader of the church speaks ex cathedra, speaks
You know, the hierarchy.
with the authority of the church. And basically what they said is tradition is the voice of God. I mean, in the end, that's what they
Yes.
said. So this text, the biblical text, wasn't even translated for 1,500 years, you know, and,
I knew nothing about the Old Testament.
yeah, well, you
I
didn't
mean,
need
nothing.
to.
No, I only knew, you know, from, what is that? You know, Matthew on.
Well, and also in the Protestant church, at least in the evangelical Protestant church, you know how confirmation here, we give confirmands a copy of their own Bible.
You're just giving them the New
You were just given the New Testament.
Yeah, do
Oh.
We were not given the Old Testament. I mean,
All
you know.
right.
You don't need all that jazz.
No, you go to the Old Testament for the story
That will only
about,
confuse you.
yeah, you go there for the story about Jonah.
Or maybe David.
Oh,
and
Because,
Goliath.
yeah, David and Goliath.
And
was
we
a
love
big
the
one.
snake in the Garden of
Yeah,
Eden.
yeah, you have to do
I did
that.
know
But
that.
other than that, you
Oh,
don't,
and Moses with all the plagues, that always goes over well with
Really
kids.
big, yeah,
Rivers of blood.
yeah. I had a great book on the Passover for children.
Oh,
Really good.
yeah, when you think about it, that's a horrible story.
yeah, for children,
Yeah. But kids love it.
But it was a children's book.
yeah.
And, you know, one of those really hard-covered ones.
Yeah, about a dad taking his kid up to a stone pile and taking a knife out, ready to cut his throat.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, that's a great bedtime story for a child. Let's see, we should have all dads
oh,
read
lay me
that.
down to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I should die
Yeah.
before I wake, I'm not gonna go to sleep.
Yeah, I
that's
know.
right. Don't take my soul while I'm sleeping, right?
What kind of a
Right.
thing is that to tell kids?
Yeah, well,
But anyway, those stories, because they have a lot of color and action, and
yes.
that was exciting, and that's what we were allowed to learn as real little kids, were just those few biblical stories, because the rest of this stuff, we're having trouble with it as
Yeah,
adults.
yeah.
I can't imagine.
Well, and they pull out, you know, one of the teaching methods, which is so strange, is that you tell a story and then you pull the lesson of the story out of the story. And no one guided Sunday school teachers in terms of what is the lesson you're pulling out of the story. So, and I think I told you, I shared with you that in a previous life I was a representative for a curriculum. I traveled all over to churches. And one of the things I pleaded with Sunday school teachers in my training events was to say, let the story be the lesson. Just tell the story. Stop trying to extract the moral of the story out of the story, because the biblical stories do not lend themselves to, they are not Aesop's fables. They do not lend themselves to be reduced to morals. And we are not supposed to be in here teaching the law of God. We're supposed to be teaching the gospel God. The gospel of God is contained in the story. So my appeal to Sunday school teachers was, just make sure they know the story. Because if they know the story, they will carry the story with them all their life. And it will have a million applications over life. And that was the whole idea of the whole story of the Bible. But what happens, and you have these parts of the Bible where the story is told, but then somebody tries to take control of what you might think the story means.
Right.
And that's what preachers do, right?
Right.
They read the text and then they tell you
That means.
Well, you know,
what
you
it
always
means.
got, as a Sunday school teacher, you always got your David C. Cook
Yes.
for the month ahead of time. So, because I taught Sunday school many, many years at the Baptist church. And that was just your guide, that all was your guideline. That's what was
Right.
expected for you to teach, and you stuck with that.
Now say this.
Yeah, almost
And-
exactly.
Yeah, and say this, now you
And-
say this, and that's because they
And what
were,
about, but then that doesn't take into account that you're talking to kids,
Yeah.
and their questions are not gonna be
No,
what David C. Cook
and they,
anticipates.
I was lucky because
Just
I had
not.
the younger kids. They believed anything I said, so. that's even-
Well,
By the
Probably
time
why
they're
I like,
teenagers,
probably
they're
why I liked pre-K. Well, Miss Pat said,
like,
but I also think, my experience of Sunday school, I know is not universal, but, Sunday school was where I learned to scribble and doodle.
oh, gee.
That's what I learned. I learned that the teacher will just keep talking.
and it
So,
looks like you're taking notes.
Yeah, and you say, well, the kids' questions. Questions? I'm just scribbling. I'm just writing, making faces and drawing.
pastor's
and
kid.
I'm praying for the clock to move faster than it moved.
I remember
I mean-
sitting after Sunday school, we had to go to church. My mom
Oh, yeah.
was in the choir, so she wasn't sitting next to me. So I'm sitting there, and all the O's on the bulletin.
Yes, we
all
used to do that
filled
to
in.
find all
And
the
then all of a
O's.
sudden, I'll never forget her name, Bea Baxendale, sitting if she happened to be sitting behind you.
Give you a
and
big
she'd say,
poke?
Boom, right in back.
Yep.
So ridiculous.
Oh, we used to, with my siblings, there were always a bunch of us sitting, and my mother couldn't reach us all. And so
Pass it on.
we would listen, like we would take a prayer and we'd pick a word. It's almost like the drinking games.
Uh-huh.
Every time a person says the word, Jesus, you have to take a drink. But instead, every time the person said the word Jesus, you had to make a line on your bulletin.
all right.
And then we compared notes at the end to see who
Boy, that was a
who
good
got it
one.
right.
I was listening, well, my younger daughter,
God.
Helda, used to, when Jack would say, now, hear the word of God, she thought he said, hear the word God. And every time he said God, she'd go,
He said
Yes.
God.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, Helda, go downstairs.
That's so cute.
Hear God. Hear the word God. Hear it every time I say it.
For the word of God.
Yes.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
telling you, what kids
Kids
do.
are wonderful.
Yeah, they are.
They're just wonderful.
And I understand, don't try and interpret a lot of stuff.
Right.
Because it's not even gonna be the same for you
No.
a year later. You'll read that and you'll say, oh, I didn't get that
No.
the first time I read that.
And that's, again, that was my whole shtick with this curriculum was stop teaching in a way of saying, we're gonna boil this down now to what you can take home out of the text. Just tell the story. And that was where the whole idea of get costumes, let them enact a story, let them, we do spend some time at Christmas talking about what it means, but we don't teach children what it means. We teach children the story.
Right.
We tell them there were shepherds, and they go, what? And then you put the shepherd costume on. You get inside the story. In your life, in living your life, there may be times when the elements of the Christmas story will bloom in your life and give you something that you need. But you cannot give that to children
If they don't know it.
if they don't know the story.
They have to have biblical literacy before you have understanding.
Exactly. And that's why, coming home from Bible study last night, the story of Esther, I was telling the secretary, Chris, this morning that, somebody's
Somebody's calling you.
Vanderplat.
It's a funeral.
Which one do you want me to,
Push the big red.
the big red guy?
Yeah,
Sorry,
he'll
Vander.
leave me a message. I was telling Chris she asked how Bible study was. I said, well, we had great with the story of Esther. She said, I've never read the story of Esther. And what I said was,
That's an exciting
look,
one.
you should
Queen
go,
Esther.
just go and read the story. It's like better than watching a little, 90-minute like television show. It's a great story. And then what happened to us last night was when you come back and you revisit it, you hear out of the story leaps theology of God. Who is God? God's never mentioned. How does God work in the world? It all is there. But again, how did you say that? If you haven't read,
Yeah.
you said it before. If you don't,
If you don't
first,
have biblical literacy,
right?
you can't have biblical understanding.
That's exactly it.
That
and-
is what I said.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
that is what you said.
It's exactly
That's what
what
I
you
liked.
said, Debbie.
So,
I like it too.
Don't forget what
there
it
is-
said immediately after.
There's a tragedy. There's a complete tragedy. And I mean, I'll go to my grave crying about it, that what we do here and what we do, is rare in the Christian community.
It's too bad, because that, to me, is the only thing you should be doing.
I mean,
No,
it's,
you should be helping people
Well,
and
no,
actually going out.
but this is what makes
You have
you-
to understand why
Yeah,
you're doing
this,
it.
this is why
Not
you
just
want to do
For
it.
people to go, oh, you're such a good person.
Yeah.
That's
No, I'm with you. You mentioned Ruth. The book of Ruth, she was a real role model for me because I had to decide what I was going to do about practicing my faith. Like my father kind of felt like I lost my faith, but that's not really what was happening. And I couldn't quite explain that to him because of this indelible mark on my soul when I was baptized as an infant. He knew for sure this was not a good idea. But Ruth, talks about your people will be my people, your God will be my God. And I thought,
And Richard
Wayne
Burton-
made it very clear there wasn't any way he could buy into Catholicism. Like, he said that would just be living, like really a lie. Like, I really can't do that. Like if I'm going to pray, I don't need to call on, St. Anthony. Okay. But anyway, long story short, that's what actually made my decision that I could leave the church. And it was a hard decision, and I was very young. And you have to remember, this is, Patty, who was a member of the Legion of Mary, in high school. That was something you volunteered to join. And I was very into my faith.
Right.
But I knew that at home, my family was really grounded. Like all 9 of us went to Mass every Sunday together. 4 of us big kids sat in front of my parents so they could watch any shenanigans, and my parents sat in the back with the 3 younger behind us. And Wayne's family also went to church together as a family. And I said, yeah, that was all I knew. And I wanted that. I did not want to lose that. I didn't want to be dropped off at St. Anthony's for Wayne to go to the Baptist church.
Right, so.
I didn't
you
want it.
wanna be together,
Well, we knew that
families.
wasn't going to work. We
Right.
knew that wouldn't work for us.
But there you have your example, in
Yes.
Ruth. I think that's why the story of Ruth is appealing,
Yep,
because
Practical.
people can actually see themselves
Yep.
in the story.
agree.
Whereas some of the stories about the kings that are killing, I can't see myself.
Yeah,
in
they're not
this,
about
right?
us.
No,
Right.
not us either, no.
Maybe we can see our own leaders in those stories, but they don't have as much resonance with the common person. If I wanted to resonate with some of those
Yep.
characters, I'd be the person who was slaughtered, because who am I? I'm not the king
Yep.
or the queen or the, you know,
That's a wonderful, it
The
is.
general.
I love the Book of Ruth.
I'm the cannon fodder.
Right.
But with Ruth, there's like this generous
And Naomi is
human,
there.
and a female human being
Right.
at that, which is like, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for points of resonance. Where can this make some sense in my own life?
And I think that the book of Genesis, actually, the lesser known, Genesis, the creation, but then the story of Abraham and Sarah. And their family struggles and their life and the problems of jealousy,
Ooh, yeah.
and how the jealousy destroys their families, and how the parents play into it. It's all so relevant, because it reminds us of
Of
our
life.
life as we try to live it.
Yeah.
And along the way, there is the story of the promise of God walking with us and with them. And, and they make mistakes, they make terrible decisions, Abraham especially. When he's referred to as the father of faith, when you know his story, you could call him the father of failure in faith. I mean, he was the most frightened, weak individual ever. But he becomes the father of faith, I think, in our tradition, because God never rejected him. He remained the patriarch in spite of everything that he did.
Right.
And then, of course, his sons, the wives of the sons, don't rise in the story as much, but his own sons. I mean, Jacob was a liar. Jacob was a liar. He was a deceptor. He did everything he could to deceive and to reject the whole of the tradition that was supposed to control. This is Jacob. This is the father of faith.
Yep.
It's really the model of human brokenness in many ways.
And there you see the love of God in those books,
Yeah.
because he continues to love them in spite of themselves.
And that's all
Yeah.
Old
Yes,
Testament.
Right.
so there you go. That's why, like,
So,
but that's how it was actually presented to me.
Well, I know, because there was no effort really to read and understand the Hebrew scriptures.
Right.
And instead, they just pushed them aside and pulled out of them what they wanted to hear, and then went to a doctrine that said, oh, it's all inerrant, and we have to believe it all. They like the passages that they think are about gay people, and how God
Oh,
hates gay.
that's the
They like
best.
those passages, but they don't really want to deal with any of the rest of it. Well, thank you for
Thank
your
you,
energy
Pastor.
today. I'm going to put my bookmark in at, we finished
go to-
14, right?
We're going to go to 15.
We're going to go to 15. Thank you to those of you who are watching online. I'm reminded, after I got home last night, I forget sometimes that there are people who are actually watching online, and also those who come later in the week
Right.
and are
Tune in.
following our episodes and reading along with us. So thank you to those of you who are doing that. You're always welcome here. If you want to make comments, I always forget to say this, the YouTube channel does allow you to make comments. If you scroll up from the bottom, you can identify yourself if you want to. You also can ask questions there, which I will see. They pop up on my phone, and I'd be happy to come back and incorporate them too into the conversation around the table here.
Wonderful.
Okay?
That'd be
Thank you
great.
very much, and I will see you next week.
Inshallah, I won't be here.
You will
Um,
never.
I am,
all right.
inshallah, hoping to be in New Hampshire.
Oh, good for you, Deb.
Well, that'd be good.
Good for you.
So if you see me, that fell through. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's excellent.
So you guys have mission.
Yeah, we have a mission
Is
meeting.
it turned off yet?